Welcome back. In Public Forum today, we are talking about the Global Hunger Index, and interestingly, today is also the World Food Day. Dr. Purnima Menon, are there concerns around food crisis across the world, which reflects largely in these? While these reports are brought out, is there a concern around that? Because the population is constantly increasing. It is not just about countries like India and China or some other countries, but it is about the world population, which is certainly increasing, and we may not be able to meet the crisis, the food crisis, that is substantially going to increase. Are there concerns around that?
There's certainly a lot of discussion around that. There's been a lot of, I think just yesterday there were meetings on feeding the world to 2050, feeding the 9 billion. So there's quite a lot of discussion around that. I think, there's probably less of a worry of do we have enough energy? Are we going to be able to produce enough grain to feed people? But I think there's a lot of other questions to be asked around one of the themes of the report this year, which is on this issue of hidden hunger. Are you going to be able to feed people high quality diets that meet all of their nutritional needs, not just how much energy they need, but also protein and micronutrients and things like that. And that requires a hard think, because it requires thinking about agriculture in a different way. It requires thinking about agriculture in ways that meet not just your quantity needs, but also your quality needs. And I think that is something that needs us to think and needs a lot more work around. A lot of the work around agriculture in the last 30, 40 years has been very much on meeting sort of basic hunger needs. And one of the things that we really want to do, and that the report this year really tries to do, is to say, look, it isn't just about hunger in the sense of starvation or not having enough calories to eat, but it's really important for us to think about hunger from the perspective of hidden hunger, and that relates to the quality of people's diet.
That's right.
And this is a huge challenge. It's a huge challenge worldwide. It's a huge challenge in India. We have to, there's a long way.
And if we talk about the Indian perspective here, the quality of food, is there a lot of focus on that, or do you think that the idea of quality itself is beyond a lot of policies that are drafted in this country? Because it is about so many mouths to feed, so many people to feed. So think about the quantity first, the quality comes next.
Yes, absolutely. Unfortunately, that's true. And there's such a huge equity issue here, and from the point of view of people's rights, it's really sad that so many years after independence, children, and this dietary surveys, year in, year out, have been saying this, that children are essentially eating just rice, essentially eating just wheat. So they'd get eggs, meat, fish, if they're culturally used to eating that maybe once a month, maybe once a season. Getting dal once a week, once a month. This is very, very recent surveys in tribal areas that we have been engaged with in Odisha, in Jharkhand, so those kinds of, that kind of information is really shocking, because we always knew that dal consumption is low, even vegetable sources of protein, but dal once a month a child gets. I think that this country should be shocked out of its mind. So leave alone fruits and vegetables. Yes, vegetables, people relate that they will eat a little bit of green leafy vegetables here and there, but if you look at quantities, it's really minuscule, and it will substitute for, when you're eating potato, you will not be eating dal. When you're eating dal, you'll not be eating the next vegetable, etc. So these are the choices that people are making, and
is it directly related to poverty?
Absolutely so, because thanks to the efforts of the ASHA program and the Anganwadi workers, there's a high degree of information around now, even in deep tribal areas. So when you go around and say, when do you think your child should start complementary feeding, for example, which is a big issue for this country, they will say 6 months. But when you try to actually explore that and investigate this problem, it's women's time, women's energy. So the the women's labor component, which has never been factored in to understand why malnutrition happens. So there's a big gender component. That aside, then when you say what do you consider good quality foods, and people will be speaking in terms of eggs and milk, etc., there's a complete non-availability, and then they will just laugh, and here's a city person coming to ask questions and say, Didi, anda to 5 rupees ka aata hai na, to kaise denge? Then what is one's answer to this kaise denge? But state governments have moved on this front. I want to keep bringing this in. Odisha, for example, each family, I know families in tribal areas, a family would be getting 6 eggs a week, which is massive, because there are 2 children under 6, so they're getting 2 eggs a week, and then there's a maybe a pregnant and lactating woman, so she also gets 2 eggs a week, and that in an impoverished area means a lot. The PDS is making a difference wherever it does exist. Chhattisgarh, where
so has this really changed the state of affairs in places like Orissa, especially within Orissa, in places like, for example, Bolangir and Kalahandi and other places? Bolangir, in fact, happened to be one of the places which had a huge rate of malnutrition. Has it really changed?
It's difficult to say because the gap is huge.
The gap is huge.
The gap is huge, but Odisha's statistics are showing, improvements, and in terms of mortality, etc. And I think that that's the way to go. But we need to think much more comprehensively. And this idea that very focused and very sharp and very targeted interventions are going to necessarily make a big dent is unlikely, in my opinion.
I mean, I was very surprised and shocked, in fact, to see the story of Attapadi in Kerala, which gives you a very different kind of example.
So there are pockets of deep deprivation now. And I think that some states have these larger pockets, like Madhya Pradesh is a typical key example.
UP.
And UP, which, but even in well-off states, there are pockets, and we are able to highlight vulnerabilities quite easily now from our understanding of the sector. So we know mostly which households, which hamlets, which villages, and they would have a congregation of vulnerabilities. So the systems outreach to those areas is going to be poor. The water and sanitation situation is, water in particular, power, water, access to education. I mean, we have to think of all these, kinds of determinants. So women's literacy will be poorer, access to wages and wage work is going to be poorer, land holdings are going to be smaller. So there's a congregation of things that go together, and therefore just having very, very specific interventions that are, close to the issue of malnutrition but not going far enough or deep enough, perhaps are not going to sort out the problem. That's why the Anganwadi, with its S&P, etc., and the ASHA with the IYCF, and these all are essential. These proximal, factors are essential to tackle, but very likely they're not going to be sufficient.
Necessary but not sufficient.
Necessary but not sufficient. Fine. On that note, we'll take a very quick break in Public Forum. Please stay tuned for more on the other side of this break. In Public Forum today, we are talking about the Global Hunger Index. And Dr. Santosh Mehrotra, who's a professor at JNU, now joins me. Dr. Mehrotra, the entire issue of hunger, poverty, before you joined us, of course, we had touched upon the diversities that you see in our own country, within states, between states, among states. What does it really indicate? And specifically, looking at the Global Hunger Index, that certainly suggests that India's position has improved. Many people might say it's because of the number of policies that we have introduced in the last 5 or 10 years, as a result of which there had been awareness and probably the figures have improved. But, looking at the fact that there are so many interstate discrepancies, within the state you see so many discrepancies, how difficult do you think is going to be the road ahead for this country, which has to fight with poverty, hunger, malnutrition, awareness, deprivation, at every level? Dr. Mehrotra, I mean, it's very scary, but it's very important to look at this.
Actually, it's not so scary if we were to focus.
It's never been very scary for you. I have known that. You are always very optimistic about it.
No, but only because I think most of us know what is required to be done. If we would just focus on those. So let me just say, let me tell you what I believe is the good news. If those of us who work on issues of nutrition and hunger know that the conceptual framework goes as follows, that what determines sort of nutritional outcomes are actually essentially three sets of things. One is the quality of your health services. The second is the quality of the food, or the quantity and the quality of the food that you ingest. And the third is care. Now, care dimension is a sort of intangible dimension, but it actually has very concrete, tangible dimensions, which actually my colleagues were talking about just now. It's the care that the mother is able to give to herself, and the society gives to the mother, and the mother is able to give to the child.
Right.
So these are the three dimensions. Now, the good news is that we do know that the most recent indicators have told us that malnutrition rates for children under 3, am I right, under 3 have dropped from under 5, sorry, have dropped from 43% to just 30.7, which is great news. However, let's just recall that 30% is the average rate in sub-Saharan Africa. And 2005-6 NFHS data was telling us, and I'm coming now to your statewide, I'm coming, having talked about the sort of the good picture, let's just remind ourselves that Kerala, which was our best state in 2005-6, had a malnutrition rate of 30%. For God's sake, our best state is only as bad as Africa is. So there's something very seriously wrong. It's true that we've had, on the care dimension, great improvement, because Anganwadis have been universalized in the country between 2006 and 2013, which wasn't the case till 2006 when the NFHS was done. The second good news is that on the health services side, we have, at least thanks to the National Rural Health Mission, at least half of all our primary health centers would operate 24/7. Which is absolutely critical if you want to, if you think that your public health system is functional. So these two dimensions we've done very well. The third dimension, which is the food intake, has been impacted almost certainly, despite the variability within states, between states. The food intake has been impacted by the fact that incomes have grown at the bottom of the pyramid. No question about that. Because otherwise, by the Tendulkar line, you wouldn't have seen a dramatic decline in the numbers of the poor. The numbers of the poor, not just the incidence of poverty, the numbers of the poor between 2004-5 and 2011-12 by 140 million. That's a staggering decline in the numbers of the poor, because sort of wages had been rising and consumption expenditure rose. So obviously, it means that people were taking in more food. Now let me pause and tell you the bad news. The bad news is that we've done precious little in this, in all this period in the last 10 years about sanitation. You cannot, give them the health services, give them the Anganwadi services, give them the food, and then they're defecating it all out into the open and infecting each other, and they're not absorbing that food. So it's absolutely critical that this government, revamps and revises completely. The new government completely needs to revamp the sanitation program. And I'm sorry to say, I regret to say that the new program on sanitation, the Swachh Bharat, it's still using the design of the previous government. Let me pause there and sort of give the floor to my colleagues.
But Dr. Prasad, that's where in fact I also wanted to come to, because when the Prime Minister launches a Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, it is also about the fact that you have to clean the environs, you have to ensure that cleanliness becomes one of your important virtues, you practice it, and also tell your children that you are supposed to have a clean environment around you. So, educate them too accordingly. But we are a country, we are a part of that world which celebrates Global Hand Washing Day. We have to educate our people about hand washing too. There are very little things which have to be taught. And that's where, I guess, Dr. Prasad, education, awareness holds the most important key. Do you think it's really going to go very far? Because the call for cleanliness has been, I'm sure that has been there for a very, very long time. But the fact that, now it has been given a push from the center, does it give it a new dimension altogether? Or do you think it is just going to remain as a slogan and merely may not be really making that sort of impact that it's intended to?
See, I would say that a slogan is good beginning. Having a slogan is better than not having a slogan, and you know, making an issue of certain things is good. So making an issue of malnutrition, something that we started doing not too long ago, was good, and then that leads to other things. And so certainly making an issue of hygiene and sanitation is good. But I am a little concerned about a very simplistic understanding of this. You know, there are things to be done at household level, family level, individual level, for sure. There's no doubt about it, because of a lack of consciousness in the general community about many of these issues. That's fair. But there are many larger issues also. You know, it's not just poor people who are spreading bad hygiene around, and all the country is suffering as a result of that, and their own selves as well. I think we have to start with the social responsibility of corporations and how they're treating the environment, what we've been able to do with our you know, environmental resources, the rivers, the forests, and so on and so forth, the land. So I think it's much larger than just a household level thing of teaching people how to wash hands. There are going to be, the minute, with all behavior change communication, there is a limited gain that you get from just the transmitting information or knowledge, because then you come up to structural barriers, systemic barriers.
That's right.
For example, if we say that you must wash and you must wash your hands, do we not know, the time use studies are telling us how hard women are having to struggle, not just women but also children, to gather water. In just the slums around Delhi, 1/3 of Delhi is a slum.
That's right.
It is a laborious and really a task of survival to get water for the family. If you look at water consumption between middle class households and slum households, it would be 40 times more in middle class households, the wastage of water, etc. So I just want to break this idea that, you know, that we can easily make this kind of a class distinction, that, you know, poor people don't know how to wash hands and don't know how to be more sanitary. I think that the issues are much, much larger in terms of equity, equitable distribution of resources, and we need to think like that. Now, coming back to programs that we launch, you know, I think there's some key principles that we continuously evade and we are flawed on, and that's why these programs are not successful. Swachh Bharat may also fall into the same trap. Unless we decentralize, unless our base is from the community, and it's a bottoms-up approach, and especially in toilets. If you look at evaluations of all these toilet programs that have happened, we built toilets, beautiful looking things which have been used as storehouses, because they never fulfilled the requirements that that particular community had. So I think bottoms-up programs, decentralized programs, flexible programs that take people into trust, that work with people, and so they have to be community-centered, community-owned, community-based as far as possible. Decentralization is the key, whether we speak of malnutrition or whether we speak of hygiene and health and sanitation and all that. We are not talking to our people, our own people.
That's right. And that's where comes the performance of states, and the experiences with different states also vary. Much of it also rests with the administration at the state level. And of course, local governance is a very, very key issue. But look at the way our urban local bodies function in the country. Till date, we talk about strengthening them, not really giving them enough powers. So that's where you have some examples where the ULBs must be really working well, the panchayats must be really doing well. But then at large, you know, I mean, largely if you look in the country, either they don't have the funds, or they don't have the plans, or they don't have enough resources.